This is a true story, and the HOA has long been a thorn in the side of the residents. Here's the full story. The complex wasn't perfect when I bought my condo in 2020, but it felt like home. Like a solid investment, a place where neighbors knew each other, and the biggest drama was usually who left their recycling bin out too long. The HOA fees were reasonable, covering basic landscaping and maintenance, plus a small buffer in the reserve accounts, particularly healthy in my section, the older buildings, quiet and established. The HOA board members, in those early days, were mostly just regular folks, volunteers doing their civic duty, rotating on and off every few years, usually because they sold their unit and moved away. Then came Brenda. She joined the board in 2021, a force of nature wrapped in sharp suits and an even sharper tongue. From the moment she arrived, the air in the complex seemed to thicken, charged with an energy that was less about community improvement and more about control. I didn't grasp it immediately, but looking back, the signs were all there. The board member turnover rate spiked dramatically after Brenda joined. In the year alone before the car incident, 2 presidents had resigned, and 2 other members bailed out. People who had served for years suddenly couldn't get out fast enough. Before 2021, the only resignations I'd witnessed were from owners who were literally selling their homes and leaving the state. Brenda was the common denominator, the catalyst for this mass exodus. I saw firsthand how she operated. A neighbor I was friendly with, a kind woman named Carol who had been on the board for a couple of years, seemed to shrink every time Brenda was mentioned. In 2022, Carol resigned, utterly exhausted. She confided in me later, voice trembling, that Brenda had systematically belittled her ideas, questioned her integrity, and isolated her from other board members. It was a campaign of subtle, relentless bullying that eventually broke her spirit and her willingness to serve. What was frustratingly baffling was that despite this clear pattern of driving out competent, decent people, Brenda had her supporters. She possessed a weird, almost hypnotic charisma, like a sleazy car salesman who could talk you into buying a lemon and make you feel good about the deal. She spoke with absolute conviction, spouting confidently about complex issues she seemed to barely grasp, yet many residents bought into her act. She promised efficiency, tighter control, a better, complex, and painted anyone who questioned her as being against progress. And critically, she had allies on the board itself, people who were either genuinely swayed by her rhetoric, intimidated by her, or perhaps saw some benefit in aligning with her. This inner circle acted as her shield, enabling her behavior and shutting down dissent from within. Life in the complex started changing, and not for the better. Over the past 2 years, crime levels increased significantly, shifting from rare annoyances to genuine concerns for safety. We saw mail and package theft become almost routine. Auto crime spiked dramatically, broken car windows, catalytic converters stolen in broad daylight, even entire cars disappearing from the parking lot. It escalated further with abandoned stolen vehicles showing up, dumped in our complex, and 2 terrifying carjackings that happened just outside the main entrance. Amidst this rising tide of fear, the board, under Brenda's dominant influence, made a decision that felt utterly counterintuitive: they got rid of the roaming security patrol. This was a service we'd had for years, perhaps not a perfect deterrent, but a visible presence that offered some sense of safety. Brenda's reasoning was that the security didn't deter crime. Her argument was deeply flawed, bordering on willfully ignorant. Of all the crimes plaguing us, package theft was the only one that occurred with any regularity when we did have security. Car theft, carjackings, those exploded after the security was gone. But Brenda presented her decision as a logical, cost-saving measure based on her analysis, and her supporters on the board backed her. Worse than removing security was her constant advice to residents: do not call the police. Her rationale? Calling the police would bring property values down. It was a bizarre, dangerous directive that left residents feeling helpless and unprotected. We were told to report incidents to the HOA instead, where Brenda would then manage the information flow, often downplaying or dismissing events. Every time crime was brought up at a board meeting, or in a community forum, Brenda would react with a predictable pattern. She would either completely ignore the comment, as if the person hadn't spoken, or she would pivot to victim blaming. "You shouldn't leave valuables in your cars," she'd snap, or, in response to package theft, "You need to be home to receive your deliveries. It's not the HOA's responsibility to be your personal parcel service." If someone pressed the issue, she would shut them down by rattling off a series of incorrect, often wildly inaccurate, crime facts she'd clearly manufactured or misunderstood, delivered with the conviction of her professor persona. It was infuriating. She created the conditions for increased crime by removing security and discouraging police involvement, and then blamed the victims for not being more vigilant. The financial situation under Brenda's unofficial leadership was equally alarming. My HOA fees had more than doubled since I purchased my condo in 2020. Doubled. For demonstrably less security and increasing problems. When I, along with a few other concerned homeowners, questioned this massive increase at a board meeting, Brenda's reaction was immediate and intense. She didn't calmly explain the budget, she flipped out. She launched into a defensive tirade, saying how she's a professor, and it took her months and months to get the finances straight after the previous board. The non sequitur about her profession was classic Brenda. She's a nutrition professor, and she somehow manages to weave that into almost every conversation or argument, implying her expertise in one field magically translates to unquestionable authority in all others, including complex financial management. It was absurd. The financial inquiry got even more disturbing. Our complex has different sections, and depending on the condo layout and type, each section has its own reserve account intended for long-term maintenance specific to those buildings. The units in my section had the most money in reserves because our buildings are the oldest and require larger potential outlays down the line. However, under Brenda's tenure, the reserve account for my section was depleted, drained, effectively, to pay for unexpected construction issues with the new, million-dollar condos in a different section of the complex. And now, Brenda was making the homeowners in my older section repay that depleted reserve fund through special assessments and increased fees. We were being forced to foot the bill for problems in the luxury buildings, problems that occurred on her watch, and then expected to rebuild our own safety net for future maintenance on our older buildings. It was blatant financial mismanagement and felt like a targeted raid on the section she seemed to care least about, the one she wasn't living in. The tension in the complex was a constant low hum, fear of crime, frustration over fees, resentment towards Brenda and her enabling board. But it escalated dramatically and terrifyingly for me more recently. I live in the older section of condos that does not have a sidewalk on my side of the street. This means that for anyone living on my side, including myself, to walk on a sidewalk safely away from traffic, we have to cross the street. The nearest continuous sidewalk is on the same side of the street where Brenda lives. This means crossing her driveway is a regular part of my routine when walking my dog or going for a stroll. Some of the condo units, including Brenda's, have a motor court area. It's effectively one large driveway entrance from the street that then splits into a somewhat T-shape or cul-de-sac leading to about 10 individual garages. It's wide enough for 2 cars to comfortably pass, which is relevant. It was a regular afternoon. I was walking my dog, carrying him as I often do when crossing streets or driveways to keep him safe, especially given how some neighbors speed. I was on the sidewalk on Brenda's side of the street, just about to cross her specific driveway entrance into the motor court, heading towards my street. As always, I looked both ways before crossing a driveway, knowing the speeding habits around here. That's when I saw her car turning sharply into the motor court entrance. Brenda. She was pulling in quickly, and she made no attempt to stop or even slow down as I was clearly visible on the sidewalk, directly in her path. My blood ran cold. Time seemed to slow. I looked at her car, and then up at her. She made direct eye contact with me. It wasn't a distracted glance. It was a hard, focused stare, right into my eyes, as her car continued its trajectory directly towards where I was standing on the sidewalk, about to cross. There was no wave, no acknowledgement, just that chilling, unwavering gaze as she drove straight at me. I was so startled, so acutely aware of the impending impact if I didn't move, that I instinctively took a large, hurried step backward off the sidewalk, pulling my dog closer. The front of her car swerved slightly towards me as she pulled in, almost as if anticipating I wouldn't move fast enough. Then, without breaking eye contact, she sped up, accelerating past the spot where I had just been standing and into her garage. The whole incident lasted only seconds, but it felt like an eternity. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, clutching my dog tightly. It was terrifying. It felt intentional. I didn't have my phone on me, a rare occurrence that I instantly regretted. No immediate photo, no time-stamped record. But then I remembered my Ring cameras. I have motion-sensitive cameras on my balcony railing, angled to cover the street and pedestrian walkway area in front of my building, across from Brenda's motor court. They cover the sidewalk where I was walking and Brenda's driveway entrance. As soon as I got back inside, shaken but unharmed, I pulled up the Ring app. My stomach was in knots. Had it captured it? Scrolling through the motion events, I found the relevant timeframe. There it was. Grainy, but undeniable. The camera angle showed the street, Brenda's motor court entrance, the sidewalk, and a portion of the street where I was walking. I could see myself approaching the driveway, Brenda's car turning in sharply, not slowing. I saw my startled reaction, my step back. I saw her car speed up as she entered the driveway. It was confirmation. To strengthen my suspicion of intent, I decided to compare this footage to her normal driving habits. Ring only saves video for 60 days without a specific subscription level I didn't have for older footage, but I had a habit of saving random video clips periodically, sometimes just to clear storage or capture interesting moments. I pulled up random saved clips from November and December, just a few months prior. I watched Brenda pulling into her driveway on different days. The difference was stark. In the older videos, she made wider, more cautious turns into the motor court, and she always slowed down significantly when approaching the sidewalk area, checking for pedestrians, even when no one was there. The contrast with the recent incident, the sharp turn, the speed, the deliberate eye contact, the failure to slow down despite my clear presence, was damning. It wasn't careless driving, it felt deliberate. Still reeling from the incident and armed with the video evidence, I showed the clip and the comparison footage to my mother. She was horrified. Without telling me exactly what she planned to do, she took the video and reported the incident on a local website that addresses traffic safety issues and allows citizens to submit concerns about dangerous driving. What happened next confirmed my suspicions completely. Within minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, of my mother submitting that report online, my phone buzzed. It was a text message. From Brenda. The text was immediate, defensive, and completely bypassed any normal channel of communication. It read something like, "I understand you've reported something about my driving. You need to come directly to me to discuss any issues you have instead of going online. There was nothing wrong with how I pulled into my own driveway. You were walking inappropriately." My hand started shaking again. How did she find out that fast? The website didn't use my name, only the location and description of the event. Unless, she was monitoring that specific site. Or someone who saw it immediately alerted her. The speed of her reaction was terrifying. And her immediate defensiveness and attempt to control the narrative spoke volumes. You need to come directly to me, typical Brenda, demanding private confrontation where she could bully and manipulate without witnesses. Nothing wrong with how I pulled in, a blatant lie, contradicted by the video. You were walking inappropriately, victim blaming, straight from her crime dismissal playbook, but twisted into blaming me for walking on a sidewalk she was driving onto. But it didn't stop there. Shortly after texting me, she messaged one of our neighbors, asking him if he had reported her driving. When he said no, she went on a rant, specifically accusing me of reporting it and claiming that I was walking, in the middle of the street, a complete fabrication. This confirmed several things. She was actively trying to find out who reported her, she immediately suspected me, likely because she knew exactly what she had done and who was there, and she was already constructing a false narrative to discredit me and justify her actions. Her frantic, defensive, and lying behavior wasn't that of someone who accidentally almost hit a pedestrian, it was the behavior of someone who knew she had attempted something intentional and was now scrambling to cover her tracks and attack the witness. This incident, combined with everything else, the board turnover, the bullying, the crime negligence, the fee doubling, the reserve fund raid, her explosion over the audit request, solidified my understanding of Brenda. She wasn't just a strict HOA president, she was a manipulative, financially questionable, potentially dangerous individual who was using her position to control, intimidate, and maybe even benefit herself, all while being enabled by a board she'd either swayed or scared into submission. Now, I'm left with this horrifying piece of evidence and a daunting question: what do I do? My gut tells me the current board is part of her fan club and enables her behavior. Taking the video directly to them feels like walking into the lion's den, risking further retaliation and possibly seeing my evidence dismissed or twisted. What about the HOA management company? Are they independent enough to act against a board member, especially one as entrenched and supported, on the board, at least, as Brenda? Or do they just follow the board's direction, making them useless in this situation? I feel trapped. I have proof of a dangerous, possibly criminal act directed at me, committed by a woman who holds significant sway over my living situation and finances. I can't just let it go, not after she almost hit me, not after seeing her frantic texts and lies, not after witnessing the damage she's already done to the complex. But the path forward seems blocked by the very system she controls. Do I go to the police directly about the car incident, bypassing the HOA entirely? Do I consult a lawyer about both the car incident, potential assault with a deadly weapon, the car, and the HOA issues, financial mismanagement, creating an unsafe environment, bullying? Do I try to rally more residents, perhaps those most affected by the crime or the financial mess, to try and force a larger action, like a recall petition, even if it feels like an uphill battle against her supporters? The fear is real. Fear of retaliation from Brenda, who has already shown she's willing to use her car as a weapon and her position to bully. Fear that the board will side with her and make my life in the complex unbearable. But the alternative, doing nothing and letting her continue to endanger residents and mismanage our community, feels impossible. My Ring camera footage is a 60-day ticking clock. I've saved the crucial clips, but the window for immediate action based on that freshest piece of evidence feels urgent. I need to figure out who has the authority and the willingness to step in, to look at the evidence objectively, and to hold Brenda accountable for her actions, both the terrifying personal ones and the damaging community-wide ones. Living under her shadow has turned my home into a source of anxiety, a place where safety is compromised and financial fairness is non-existent. It's time to fight back, but I need to find a way to do it that bypasses the system Brenda has so effectively manipulated. The management company seems like a logical first step outside the biased board, but I'm acutely aware they might just redirect me back to the very people enabling the problem. This drama is far from over, and the stakes feel higher than just HOA fees or landscaping rules. They feel like my safety, my financial security, and the well-being of my entire community.